So our pectoral girdle is our upper attachment of our limbs, our shoulder to the body. And this is going to include two bones on each side. We've got the scapula and the clavicle. The clavicle this is a kind of flattened hammer-like side, the sternal end that attaches to that sternum in the center of the breastbone. And then the acromial end is going to attach to the acromion of the scapula. This is a superiorly flattened bone. It's got this tubercle here on the underside, that's the inferior view. And this clavicle is the most commonly broken bone in the body. So this is most often fractured. Somebody falls, you fall out of a tree, fall off your bike, something like that. And your instinct when you fall is to put your arm out and catch yourself. And most of the bones in our arms are pretty good. They're thick and strong and pretty decent at removing stress. But by the time that force gets up to the shoulder, the weakest bone in that link is the clavicle. And so it's often broken. And then we have the scapula. So these are your shoulder blades. These are a triangular bone that are flat and plate shaped. They are only attached to the thorax by muscles. So these have a wide degree of movement. So if you move your arm, the scapula should move along with it as well. There are several large fossas. So there's the supraspinous fossa, which is where we have the supraspinatus muscle. We have this infraspinous fossa, which is where we have a large infraspinatus muscle. And then there's, if you flip the bone over, we have another fossa here called the subscapular fossa, which is where we have this large subscapular. This spine is posterior. So if you're standing like this guy right here, that spine is facing towards the back. This rounded edge is medial. And then this joint right here is where the head of the humerus is going to join. So this is your actual arm joint. So this would be lateral. So what side of the body does the scapula belong on, the left or the right? This is the right scapula, so you can see it matches the picture of the right scapula down here. So especially in lab, not so much in lecture, but in lab typically you need to be able to identify these bone names and determine if they belong on the left side of the body or the right side of the body. For the scapula, it's important to remember that this smooth edge points in towards the spine, right? That's your shoulder blade. That's medial, like that. So these are commonly flipped to the wrong side. And when we say left or right, I don't mean your left or right. I mean this guy, his left or right. So his left is here, his right is over here. This is the right scapula. The first bone in our arm is the humerus. So we have three portions of our upper limb. The first part we have is the arm, which is going to include the humerus. The second part we have is called the forearm, and that has two bones. We have the radius and ulna. Then we have the hand, which has the carpal, which is our wrist, the metacarpals, and the phalanges, which are the fingers. Here we've got the hemispherical head of the humerus, and this is going to articulate with the glenoid fossa, so this is going to articulate with our shoulder at the scapula. The surgical neck right here, so if you follow this around, is a common fracture point on the humerus as well, because this is where it's fairly thin, right behind this bulbous head, and is a common point of kind of breaking. The deltoid tuberosity here is a enlarged portion which is going to attach to the actual deltoid muscle, which comes up over your shoulder. So if you touch the outer portion of your shoulder, kind of over your arm, that large muscle is the deltoid. Down here we've got two condyles, one called the trochlea and one called the capitulum, and these are going to articulate with the radius and ulna. And then right behind the humerus we've got this large olecranon fossa, so this is on the other side. So the olecranon fossa is where the olecranon of the humerus is going to insert, so you can feel this on your elbow. Above these condyles we have two epicondyles, one is medial and then one is lateral. This large medial is often called the funny bone. This is where the humerus is called the funny bone, and it's because the ulnar nerve passes through this epicondyle. So it's common when you hit your elbow, it causes sensory information to overstimulate this ulnar nerve, which is what causes that pain. In the arm we have two bones here, the radius and the ulna, and this picture shows how they articulate together. So the radius has this kind of discoid head. So the head of the radius is very much circle shaped, and it helps me remember the name of this bone because the radius of a circle is the distance from the center to the edge. And so that's what this head of the radius kind of looks like. And this head rotates around along this interaction with the ulna. So if you stick your arm out and turn your hand over and back, one bone, the radius, is actually rotating over the ulna. This trochlear notch of the ulna is how we articulate the ulna with the humerus. So this is your elbow, this large olecranon. So if you reach down and touch your elbow, that's your olecranon process of your ulna. And then if you extend your arm out flat, the olecranon process goes into that olecranon fossa of the humerus. These two bones are attached to each other with the intraosseous membrane. And what this does is it helps transfer force between these two bones. So if there's a lot of force put onto one of these bones, it can actually transfer some of that force to the other bone. So that's going to help prevent breakage of bones and reduces the wear on the joint. Inside the hand, we have 8 carpal bones down here, and they appear in 2 rows. So there's the proximal row, which is the closest to the body, and then the distal row. And it's best to learn these all together as one. So in the proximal row, we have the scaphoid, lunate, the triquetrum, and then the pisiform. And then starting from the distal row on the same side, we have the trapezium, the trapezoid, the capitate, and then the hamate. So if you feel on your wrist, there's typically one pronounced bone on the same side as your pinky on the bottom of your wrist. And so what you're feeling is actually this hamulus of the hamate bone down there. So a lot of the times you can use a mnemonic device to remember kind of the first letters of these bones, and it learn them in order. So the book has one, Sally left the party to take Charlie home. And so each of those words starts with the first letter of the bone. So Sally left the party to take Charlie home. The metacarpals are the large bones in your hand. So if you feel the palm of your hand, you can feel these 5 metacarpals. So this is before your fingers actually branch off. And these are numbered. So your thumb is number 1, your pointer finger is number 2, your middle finger is number 3, your ring finger is number 4, and then your pinky finger is number 5. And that goes for the metacarpals as well. And we use Roman numerals typically when we number these bones. So if you think about how you count, when most people, at least when I start counting, I start with my thumb and then I work my way to my pinky when I count to 5. So that's actually how your phalanges are numbered. So your thumb is digit 1, and then your phalanges out here are your finger bones. Most of your fingers have 3 phalanges, one that's distal, one that's medial, and one that's proximal. The only one that's different is the thumb, so this is digit number 1. It has a distal phalanx and a proximal. And phalanx is singular, phalanges is plural, so those are the same word, just different tenses. So if I asked you to name this bone right here, you would say this is the farthest one, so it's distal. It's on the 4th digit, so it's distal phalange or phalanx number 4. So take a minute and practice describing the structures of bones by describing as many structures as you can find on the clavicle.